Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LJL Officially Unofficial Episode 2 of Season 2. We're continuing on. It means it wasn't a one-hit wonder. We're back at it again, ladies and gentlemen. LJL action, as always, and this one's going to be a spicy one. But before we get too far into it, I need to introduce my co-host. I am one of your main hosts, Alex, otherwise known as Lexi by MaskedSwan on the internet, over on the complete opposite side of your screen, or maybe in your ears, depending on how you're doing this. Nymaera, the most truthful man on this podcast, and we'll get into reason partly why for that one. Nymaera, welcome to the podcast.
No, nothing shrouded in lies here. Only spitting hot facts and truths. Yeah, I'm back. It's episode 2 of season 2. It is coming up to LJL Spring 2021, and that means we still have a lot of content to bring.
So much more content to bring, but we must introduce the man in the middle, the man that loves to play-by-play everything and anything. It's the respectful man himself. Initia1ise, welcome to the podcast, as always, Sam.
Pleasure to be here. Clearly not as truthful, but spitting some nice silver-tongued lines all the same. I clearly bring some exaggeration behind, but maybe a little less straight.
A little bit, maybe a little, but hey, we've all got our opinions here, and at the end of the day, we all love each other. Now, let's come on to it. What is this podcast about, though, Initia1ise? What is this? We've said LJL a bunch, but what is that?
This is a podcast dedicated to all things Japanese League of Legends. There is not a great deal of English content out there at all, frankly, and we're kind of the main purveyors of it right now. And that means if you're interested in the LJL beyond just watching the games and trying to get to know the teams and the players and the situations a little more, just don't have time to watch all the games, this is your one-stop shop for all things LJL.
With that assumed, do we have any affiliation, Nymaera, with Riot or their partners?
No, we don't. We've been at this for pretty much a whole year now. We started in 2020 as just the three of us trying to bring some English content towards the LJL, as my brother Sam was saying in the middle of your screens. But we have no communication with Riot. We have no connection with Riot. We are doing this off our own backs. We're doing this for our own enjoyment, our own purposes, and hopefully so we can get some really good content out to you.
Absolutely. You'll be able to find all of our social medias at Nymaera, at Initia1ise, remember, with a 1, and at MaskedSwan. You can also find out all of our LJL Officially Unofficial content, or the LJLOU content, by searching in LJL Unofficial, LJLOU, into your search bars, into most of your social media platforms, and you'll find us within as well. Also, the show notes, which are always down below, or at a tap away on your phone. Because this podcast does go out on all audio stream devices, we do also have a Discord server where we are active, and things are starting to ramp up over there. Also, as well, if you ever have any questions for us, the Discord server is probably the #1 place, and we get that on a daily basis into the general chat room, asking for our thoughts around the LJL. So if you want to question us, you can do it there, as well as also on our own unique social media platforms. Gentlemen, this is one of our biggest episodes that we do every year. We have 2 of these a year, and then we have our recap episode to kind of see how we went out. And this is the big one because this sets the stage for everything. This is our predictions episode. We're going to be going through each and every single team in the LJL, counting down their full rosters, as well as giving our prediction on where we think they will end up, why we think they're, and also covering multiple different ways. There's so much for us to cover here, isn't there?
Absolutely is. Because there's been a lot of changes in the off-season. We covered some of those back in episode 1, the one just before this, and that does leave us, however, with the meat and potatoes, as Lexi loves to say, in terms of making something out of it, not just saying what's happened, taking a bit of time to sit on it, and hopefully building something from that.
I mean, especially for you guys at home and for us as analysts, we've kind of said it in the last episode, I'll say it again here, the LJL has a problem with it being a bit of a revolving door. That means a lot of roster shuffles, and that means there's not necessarily the greatest amount of known quantities to work with, and that can mean power ranking and working out predictions can be quite a challenge. So hopefully this episode should give you some thoughts on where we're at and kind of potentially where your own thoughts are at as a result.
Absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, how we're going to be running this is on screen. If you are watching this podcast on YouTube, just to help you all out, you'll be able to flick over to the YouTube video and see the on-screen predictions as and when they go. There's a few things. We're changing things up for this predictions because we've had some feedback from our community, as well as also watching and seeing how others have done their feedbacks for, their tier lists for their own respected regions. we've changed it up a bit, as I've said. Now, what have we done? Well, first off, we've actually talked to each other about our own personal tier list. We haven't gone too in-depth with the reasons for this, but what we did is we showed each other our tier list. We then got an average or a mean, if you want to be mathematical about this. That's a mathematical term. I had to remind myself about that one. Hey, I've been doing all kinds of stuff recently.
Mean, median, mode, all that,
That's
all the good
it.
stuff.
Oh yeah, there's 4, isn't there?
Depends how
There's
stats
3
you want to get
and
into
then
it,
1.
buddy.
Yeah, I'm
not getting involved in this.
I'm a business dude. I'm not a math dude.
Where's the chi-squared?
Oh
boy.
no. All right, Mr. Math, flexing your muscles. So we have got our combined rankings. We will be going through our combined rankings, and these will be the rankings of the LJLOU that we would be happy to kind of, if people asked for our general opinion, this is where we would put these teams. However, we have our own individual opinions rather, and while we might disagree with each other on placements, the range that we have assigned to each of the teams, it kind of shows the diversity and where we expect them. Some teams will have wider diversities, others are going to be a lot tighter and smaller. We went 1 or 2 places. It's going to be it'll make a lot more sense as we go through this, however, and outside of that, am I missing anything, lads?
Seems
Pretty
about right.
good.
Okay, so gentlemen, without further ado, let's run through our current 8th place team, and that team ended up being Axis. Axis we put as our 8th place team. We have got them at a range between 6th and 8th. I'm quickly going to run through their roster that they have recently announced. In the top lane, they have Inon. In the jungle, they have a returning jungler of Hoglet. They have Megumin from the LJL Scouting Grounds. They have Honey, who was formerly over on the SoftBank Hawks. And they have Nimon, who I believe was retired. Yeah. He was a substitute
for
the top lane for CGA, and now has moved down to jungle support. No, now is their support for Axis.
Yes.
It's a wild one, gentlemen. Where's your placings?
I mean, I had them in 8th. I think that they're going to have a rough time at a lot of these different lanes. And that doesn't really do Hoglet any favors. Hoglet we knew was a high variance jungler throughout the whole 2020. In fact, in spring, when Axis looked their worst, honestly, the very early parts of spring before they went on their miracle run, Hoglet was a large part of why they couldn't find any results, because he was not finding the right ganks, actually dying quite a lot in his first forays onto the map, and having a lot of untested players coming into a new split with a new roster without that synergy built from that last team. I've got a lot of different questions to ask that team.
And Sam, you?
Very similar kind of thought process. They've got Hoglet alongside Honey, and Honey was, a new AD carry last year, and honestly, considering how difficult a time it was on the Hawks, he looked actually fairly serviceable. Problem is, they've got 2 scouting ground players in Eno and Megumi. Obviously, there was a little bit of time, I think, for where he was on DFM's subs roster. So, he's been in and around some relatively famous players, don't get me wrong, but it's a big step up to come out from effectively substitute come scouting grounds along with a role swap support to try and carry in the big leagues. And that, for me, I've got hope to see something from these players, but looking at the rest of the field, unless they really, really show up, I have a lot of worries. So I had them down in 8th as well, and I kind of had them at relatively low variance. Well, I maybe saw them maybe go up to 7th if maybe CGA or somebody else had a rougher.
Well, I've actually got them already. We're seeing our first divergence from each other. I've actually had Axis at 8th before they announced their roster. And then when they announced their roster, I kept them at 8th. Similar thoughts to you guys. And then I let it sit with me for a day. And then I remembered how good I loved their mid laner in Scouting Grounds. I was like, but they have at least one person who has shown on a stage to be a carry player. And that's just enough for me to put them at 7th. Now, our range that we have given them is between 6th and 8th, gentlemen. So we are saying there is potentially a world where Axis could make it in. Where do we think that's going to be happening?
Okay. So, my thinking here is there's a lot of rookie players in here, along with a jungler like Hoglet, who's, a good ganking jungler, but he struggles a bit when he doesn't have direction. He struggles a bit when he's having to play more farm heavy, more cerebral path.
Sure.
Consistently looking to get farm lead over 15 minutes rather than that worries me. That said, if some of these guys develop quickly, there is a world where actually come the end of spring they look quite dangerous and are pushing up a little bit further in the table. I think if you want to wait for Axis to look good, I think you're probably waiting for summer and you're hoping these guys develop, as I'm sure Axis are crossing.
Yeah, because there are two. There's kind of two opposing points for me. One is obviously there's a huge amount of changes, but that's not just in the roster. They lost Coach Yang, so Coach Yang was one of the people on that team who has been valued quite highly. In fact, has been picked up by another LJL team, and I'm sure we'll get to that late parts of it. Don't spoil it right now. And so losing someone who maybe was a bit of that brains and the prep behind this team hurts. I think at their best, Axis looked really, really good on the cerebral front of things.
Clever.
I mean, we talked about Hoglet and how he's been a bit, I mean, the word we use a lot is mercurial. And the game, if you really want to check how good Hoglet can be, is probably Axe's second game versus Sengoku in summer, where we thought, wow, Sengoku are going to be finishing first, they're going to be finishing second, these guys looking really, really good right now. And Hoglet just ganks Pyrion to death multiple times after Pyrion has made it so hard the entirety of that split to gank him. So I think if you can get Hoglet firing on all cylinders, yeah, that could be a good team. There's a lot of hoops to jump to before we get to that point. So for me,
if I may, just before Sam,
go on,
Jodo Philip, just to jump on top of that point, has also moved down from a coach and is now an advisor, just to really back that up. So I know at least from what we heard from some of the players over in Axis, he was an important figure, at least for the players to go to and kind of just talk to about League and just around stuff in general. I don't know if that's a step sideways or a step down, or kind of role within the team.
It's really hard to tell,
really hard
unless
for
you
us to
have
know.
background knowledge. Literally, if you've seen the team scrim, if you know the team personally, it means a lot different to us who are a fan broadcast halfway around the world without any direct contact with them.
But as we've recently come to know, Jodo Philip does speak Korean, Japanese, English, and German. So maybe now, because we've recently learned that, maybe we might poke them at some point to maybe see if they're interested in coming on the cast. But go for it, Sam. Go for it, Initialize. What were you going to want to say?
Basically saying, look, there is a point where you can see Hoglet's strength in that one game versus Sengoku. I would contrast him, and I believe it was the first game summer of Axis versus Burning Core, where Hoglet ended up down 5 levels and 100 CS in the jungle by 20. It was rough. It was really rough. Like, there is that, and that's kind of the contrast and stuff. He gets to play that gank heavy, very directed, I am putting you in the dirt kind of playstyle. He looks good. If he's being asked to play slightly less obvious endpoints on your jungler, so the likes
Graves,
of Silas,
Kindred.
Graves, Kindred, Lily, where it is a little bit more mercurial. It's like, okay, I need to try and find CS and XP leads against my opposing jungler, not just find this one person to repeatedly slap him in the face. He can look a little bit more problematic. I mean, there was lots of other stuff going on there with Luke and the rest of it, don't get me wrong, but if you want to see that contrast in styles and contrast in outcomes, those are the games.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, Axis definitely has the opportunity. Their top laner, Inon, played under Ebby for the last year, so at least that's someone to be... That's probably one of the best top laners to be playing under, and Ebby definitely could give that guidance. There's a lot of opportunity. Honey has now actually had a year now in the league to hopefully start... Yeah, and the summer wasn't terrible, so there's a chance that now that this could be a roster that Axis could make it their 6th. We're predicting they're going to be 8th/7th, but there's a world. And hey, we always want to be proven wrong, especially by these lower placed teams, because it's so much harder to actually know who's going to fire up at the very beginning. We have to make a stand, and Axis is one of them. Gentlemen, is there anything else we want to say, or do you want to move on to our next team?
Let's mosey on to the next team, I think.
I mean, I'm excited to see some of these scouting grounds players. That's kind of my one thing, and hopefully they show up.
Indeed, I'm very excited for the scouting grounds players because I did so much scouting during that. During that, gentlemen, our combined range, opinion, and everything brought us to our 7th place team, and that team is Rascal Jester, who also have a combined range of 6th to 8th, so we definitely think they can move around. And I'm going to go back to Nymaera again. Nymaera, where have you got them?
So let me just flick over to my own list quickly. I have them in 7th, and I had them with a range of 5th to 8th, actually same as Axis. So I think that actually, so don't get me wrong, I maybe this is a bit more hope for Rascal Jester than Axis. I do have a couple of questions about some of the next teams we're going to come and talk about rather. I think Rascal Jester do have a couple of interesting things to talk about because, of course, obviously in summer they had to blow up their roster because of the COVID situation across the world wide. And of course, everyone out there who's listening to us, hope you're keeping safe, hope you're being sensible. And during this time, because we were saying that in the very first podcast, and yet here we are a year later. But Rascal Jester have formed themselves another roster, and they picked up a duo Korean bot lane in Sol and Secret. I believe that's it. I don't have it on my screen, so I just need to check that's the
I
correct
can run it down
pronunciation.
quickly right now.
Yeah.
So this is the Rascal Jester roster for 2021. They are running Kinatu in the top lane, Hatchamecha in the jungle one more time. They've got Recap in mid lane, and then this duo Korean bot lane of Sol and Secret, who have played in and around the LCK for the last.
No, so I guess in my opinion, I mean, the question is what separates Rascal Jester and Axis if I've got them both at like this lower end of the standing, probably 7th, 8th, maybe pushing up to 6th, maybe even 5th on a good enough split. I think that it's a shared thought between the both of us, but all three of us, that it's Axis probably have maybe the better solo lanes comparative. I'm not really sure, but then you look at Rascal Jester and they're bringing in a couple of players that have either had a break or haven't been really too convincing, and you're really looking at Rascal Jester's bot lane in this duo Korean bot lane to see if they can be the ones to kind of take up the carrying brunt of this meta. And in fairness, AD carry is the role which competitive is played around right now. Gale Force AD carries, Kraken Slayer, all the mythic items coming through. I think Rascal Jester will be able to snag a couple of games off of maybe a stable bot lane performance. But there's still so many question marks, much like me with Axis as well, about a lot of new players trying to make it into the LJL for the first time and see where they stand out.
I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. Go on, Initialize, take it over.
So I have them actually up in 6th, but I had them kind of 6th to 8th. Basically because while I don't have that much faith in the solo laners, and I'm sure Lexi's you've done a little bit more on these guys. You know, the fact that I think I'm believing like Kinatu's not been playing for a year. It's been a bit wild.
They're a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah, 17-year-old. Yeah, he's young.
No,
that's right. So, and then
the mid
Recap,
laner,
who's just not been playing for a year. You know, there's some weirdness there. That said, I actually quite rate Hatchamecha. I think he's one of the better junglers. I think he's a very smart jungler, especially in the early game. And even when Rascal Jester and Summer were running with a complete shoestring roster due to chaos with COVID and visas, like they'd lost 2 of their main players, more, it felt like in some ways. I think they were losing, they'd lost their coaches as well. No, that was just accident. Apologies. I still think Hatchamecha did a fairly good job of at least trying things out and trying to be competitive out. And so I have a lot of faith in him. And I think Sol and Secret are veterans, and despite coming from some of the lower end of LCK stuff, actually people like Secret have impressed in the past. And Sol has actually been relatively stable and held up okay into lanes. You know, in a league that contains the likes of Deft, Bang, Prey, Ruler, all of these superstar world-beating carries. He's a guy who was playing amongst those guys and did all right for himself. He wasn't the best, but he certainly wasn't the worst. And that stability alongside with some veteranship gives me some hope for them. So while I have worries with the single solo lanes, I think that bot lane's actually going to be surprisingly good, and I quite like Hatch. So I pushed them up to 6th, but if the solo lanes fail, they could happily tumble down that.
Happily.
Last but not least, yeah, I'm a far more negative on Rascal Jester than both of you. I've got them as my 8th place team. I am not particularly optimistic. I do think they could also have a range of +2, exactly the same as Axis. I think there's totally a reasonable chance that they can sneak in as a 6th place team. But my problem is I think Megumi from Scouting Grounds has a higher skill cap than Kintanu from what we saw in Scouting Grounds. I was just not particularly impressed. Part of that is also a meta problem. A part of the fact is also they were playing on 10.25 as opposed to 11. So we didn't have all the preseason changes. We didn't have all the new items. Top lane meta was also still playing the old meta, which was still far less carry orientated unless you were the players like Rayfaki or Ebby. And we just didn't really see that. We saw a few of the top lanes trying to be a carry, but I'll be honest, he didn't need to carry in his team. He had probably one of the best junglers, being Bubble, and Lunatic, who was a great AD carry. So he just played a lot of tanks and kind of chilled out a bit more. And if they were on a carry thing, they were more the initiator and then got backed up very quickly. I think Megamin has a lot higher ceiling. That's why I've kind of put them there if I'm just comparing that. I think the solo lanes of Axis are better, but for Rascal Jester, I do agree. The bot lane has an opportunity to just have such a higher ceiling than a lot of the LJL lanes. Now, part of my reasons for still having them this low, though, is because we've been told, not just us actually, we've been told, the LJL has been told in interviews, I think it was on air on one of his last interviews leaving the LJL, he said, hey, I'm pretty confident that the top 2 to 3 teams in the LJL are about mid-range of the LCK in just level of play. I'm a little bit suspect on having 2 Korean players come in that aren't about that place and then try and bring the rest of the team up to their level. I feel like we're kind of getting in 2 Korean players who are about the same level as their teammates, which isn't a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, and they probably have a lot of experience from playing in LCK and the Challenger League as well. I just don't know if that's going to be quite enough in comparison to what Rascal Jester had last season with Vivid, Ninja, and co. Like, I think that's technically just better Korean players, and I think they've technically downgraded. Controversial, but...
No, that's fair. I think perhaps my counter would be that while these guys have not necessarily always been on the best rosters, like, for example, Sol was on the Kongdu Monsters lineups, weren't fabulous. What I will say is those guys were often the diamonds in the rough, the better members on their teams when the rest of the squad was looking rough. They actually stood up and were counted. I think Secret in particular definitely had moments where he was raising a few eyebrows in the LCK.
Secret was also on Spanu Sonic Boom and on, you know, the Prince roster, which had a one okay split and one bad split. So, yeah, they've struggled on their rosters. You're right.
Edge and Roach are now, like, Roach is part of T1 Challengers and Edge is part of Down 1 of Academy. So, like, where do you rate Rascal Jesters comparing to Down 1 Academy and T1's Academy? Is that a step up or a step down? And I would argue it's hard to judge, right?
It's kind of hard to judge because I know Sam was talking about this last week, and go back and check our first episode if you want to talk about, like, I guess more like the LJL as a whole and meta, because this is talking about spring in terms of like more of our raw. This is where we think we'll finish rather about the value of playing in the LJL and stuff like that, because the LJL is an emerging region with a lot of it's closer to the Korean culture than a lot of other emerging regions. You do see a lot of Koreans coming over here. Every roster pretty much has 2 Koreans on it. Some may even have 3 if they've lived in Japan for long enough and played here. So Vivid is a Japanese resident. A couple other players heading up there too. So that means, I mean, obviously last year when we were talking about Rascal Jester, they had Art too, right? He was one of their Koreans. Art not being picked up this year is really, really sad because he had such a good spring split. Very sad to see them go. So I guess the Rascal Jester didn't even particularly perform that well with a kind of a collapsing team while they had Art on the roster. Do I think that Sol is going to outpace Art in the LJL? I'm not so sure about that. That's why I haven't got too many hopes for them myself. But that doesn't mean it can't work. It's just that's where my break point for this team is. I look at the benchmark from 2020 and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to agree with Lexi. I do think they've downgraded. Also think Axis has 2, though, so I think that both these teams are not going to be in particularly good states.
It's really hard to kind of place, and like at the end of the day, I think we all agree someone has to be at the bottom. We're not happy about having to play someone at the bottom, but someone has to be in the bottom, and we hope that Axis / Rascal Jester, well, Axis at least did this, like in spring, pull a Cinderella out their arse and
almost
get into 6.
Almost in summer.
Almost. I mean, if they didn't go 0-8, they could have probably
pretty bad,
done
it. It wasn't a great start. Yeah,
that's some concrete shoes right there.
Yep.
Not ideal. Gentlemen, have you got anything else to say? I'm actually very happy with Rascal Jester.
Let's move on. It's pretty good coverage.
All right, let's move on to our next team. Our combined rating has put Crest Gaming Act. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Crest Gaming Act are our 6th place team. And this is big because remember, gentlemen, this team was pretty comfortably the second best team throughout most of summer until it came to the last week and things changed around and playoffs happened and that went. But coming into it for about 5 weeks in a row, CGA were the second best team. But their roster has changed pretty substantially, and a lot of things have changed. I will quickly run the roster. I forgot to let Initialize do that the first time for Rascal Jester. That is on me as the host, and I apologize to you.
It's okay. Just a second episode back. We'll get used to it.
Behind the curtain, you're seeing it all go wrong.
For Crest Gaming Act in the top lane, returning for them, they have Nap. In the jungle, they have a brand new player for them. It's Kassin in the jungle. In the mid lane, it's got a player who I'm going to now defer to Initialize to pronounce the name because I have butchered it 3 times. Nation. In the jungle, we have an LJL Scouting Grounds player of Milan.
That's ADC, not jungle.
Oh, yes. Sorry. I thought I said bot. Whatever. And the support is actually a returning member. Originally Grendel, now Alchemy has returned. So we've got 2 returning players, gentlemen, of Nap and Alchemy. We've got 2 serious rookies coming in here. 1 Scouting Grounds, 1 a DRX former academy player. So pretty good place to be. And Nehan, a minor veteran of the LCK, could I say?
Yeah, he's a veteran of the LCK. He's played in the LEC. He played over.
What were your thoughts initially about CGA as well?
Was he CB LOL as well? Like he's played in a lot of places, and he was notorious for a while for basically having not won a game. He had the longest losing streak of any pro player, I believe. And he was on that OG roster with the XPK AD carry awfulness, with that meme roster. Like, and the thing is, it's not even necessarily
motivation, work, improvement team.
Yeah, him of some infamy, and I think that might colour some people's impressions of the guy. He actually then eventually won a couple games, and even in the LCK looked all right, actually. And even when he was losing, he honestly improved quite a lot and was looking like one of the better members of the team. It's just like everything else around him was a dumpster fire. So don't necessarily judge him by the memes. Don't necessarily judge him by some of those less nice stats. He's a veteran. He's a good control mage player. I'm actually relatively excited to see what he can do. I'm just a little bit worried for CGA personally, in that, yes, they've picked up a couple interesting rookies. I know Kassin and Milan. You particularly Milan, I know Lexi's had some, he's pretty hyped for. But they've also kind of lost 2 of the hardest carries in the league in Arya, of all people, and Gango. And yes, Gango was mercurial, but when he popped off, my lord, did he destroy kids.
Hands of Felios.
First game of CGA Sengoku in summer. Go watch.
He also did similar things.
Oh, no, it was
Honey.
second in spring, was it?
He did something similar things versus the Hawks, where he had like 1,000 DPM in a 20-minute game. Like, that guy had some nut stats occasionally. He also had some awful ones, don't get me wrong. But the point being, they had 2 very mercurial, powerful, hard carry, high resource people to play around, and they lost both of them. And you've now got Nation alongside these 2 rookies, and you're asking them to fill some very big voids in terms of playstyle. So I'm a bit worried for where their playstyle will end up and who's going to be their primary carry, and I just don't know yet. It's the reason I personally put them 7th, but I said 6 to 8th depending on where things go. But I know you guys have rated them a little bit higher. I just personally have some reservations about saying, okay, big shoes to fill, rookies coming in, who's going to be the primary carry, and I'm not sold they'll have one straight out the gates.
I think that's a really kind of good way for me to set it up and give my thoughts here. So I'm pretty high on Milan. Their Scouting Ground, they were probably top 3 player from Scouting Grounds for me. Now, granted, one of the players from my top 3 hasn't actually been picked up. I've mentioned them already on this podcast, so take that as you will. I think Bubble should definitely be currently in the LJL Scouting Ground, but hey ho,
It's a lot to do.
I mean, it's tea. It's a Monster Energy drink. I mean, I still think there should be academy system in the LJL, and I'm gonna keep
we
repeating
talked about it in
that.
episode 1. Go watch it.
Soapbox is back again. There we go.
I'm putting it away. I'm putting it away. I'm not coming on that. But it is a point. I have my concerns around Alchemy still. Nothing against the guy. It's more just his level of play and how he just randomly sometimes face checks a bush where he has no vision and no need to even be there.
The LJL Hachani.
Yep.
They have got Nap, and that's a big reason for me why I can't put them much lower than 6th, because Nap just showed to be a rock in the brinkest of darkest moments for Crest Gaming Act in some of their games. Nap turned up and really put them on his back, especially when Aria maybe didn't have the early game that they needed, and he was able to do it. So for me, Crest Gaming Act, I've put them at 6th. I could see a world where they completely mental boom and they are actually on my 8th place team, but I can also see a world where they are 4th and maybe even 3rd in some way. But unlikely. I'm pretty happy with them being a 6th place team, and that's where I'm putting my place in the map. Nymaera, do you want to close this out?
I think CGA are one of the highest variance teams we have
wow.
in terms of our predictions. I've actually said anywhere between 3rd and 7th is reasonable to me. Because to an extent, because I mean, there's a lot of different things, right? You've got a rookie AD carry coming in, and AD carry is one of the best positions to come in as a rookie because your role is often quite well defined, right? I mean, so Viper on EDG right now is a Korean speaker going into EDG, which speaks entirely, and, he speaks Korean, and then the roster speaks Chinese, so he has to be there communicating cross languages, and he's still doing just really well, and he shows his mechanical prowess in this team. He's doing really well at it. So Milan, and of course that's a very different situation, but Milan coming in as a rookie, as long as he has confidence to show his playstyle, hopefully we'll have a good debut. But showing up to a big league for the first time is never easy. We've seen a lot of players thrive and succeed in positions where we didn't necessarily expect them to do one or the other. You think, oh wow, this player should do great, and then they flop. And then the opposite happens. I mean, think about Honey in Spring, for instance, last year on the Hawks really didn't show up, but then in Summer did pretty okay.
Some of the best stats as well when it comes to mechanic-wise stuff, right?
Exactly. So I look at CJ, and I have the same problems as Sam. So again, I put CJ as 6th. That's kind of my rank where I think that's where they're most likely to end up. But Nap is the best Dawn player in the LJL. Better than Ebby, better than Paz, and a number of others, really. Nap was really the player which did well on that pick. Best Wukong. Wukong's out of meta now. It's kind of unfortunate. Not the best Aatrox, a couple of things in there. So Nap has had a meta to shine, and I don't think it's there now. I think Nap's going to not have all the tools which he'd really like. And then you're kind of left with, okay, what's going to happen with this Majungle 2v2 then? So you got Nehi and you got Cassin. So again, Cassin coming in as a jungler is one of the harder roles to come in as a rookie, as a foreign-speaking talent. Hopefully there are a lot of systems in place from the org to make sure that they're well integrated, that they're feeling homely, they feel confident, and they can come in. And luckily, you do have mid-jungle to work that out. Jungle support rather is another really important duo to start looking at though. And so Alchemy, formerly Grendel, spoken a lot on Twitter about how both Gango and then a number of other AD carries he's played with taught him how to play lanes. He's really looking forward to playing with a Korean mid-jungle to teach him how to play the map better, because as Lexi was saying, we have had issues with him being the Japanese Hachani, because Hachani being that old school player of the KT Arrows roster, which was really good in Season 4, which ended up winning Season 4 Summer in LCK. Well, it was back in OGN Champions back then, of course, but Hachani was one of the best supports in the world, just every so often would just randomly die. That's just the story of that guy, and so that's what kind of like that's what Alchemy reminds me of. I was a bit more positive on Alchemy. I think that they did have a lot of issues, but then again, stuff like their Blitzcrank and Lux towards playoffs in the summer had some really good games. There's definitely some ceiling. We've seen the sparks of brilliance. It's just there are a lot of moving pieces to make work. If you hit them all in the perfect rhythm game, sure, cool, right, you get yourself a 3rd place team, maybe. Don't think they're going to do that. I think they are going to be 6th. That's where I've put them.
Yeah. What I will say, I think the placement of 6th makes sense to me. Again, I've got them slightly lower, but I absolutely understand the reasoning there. What I will say is that Nap is a fabulous weak side player. He is probably our best weak side top player in the league. By that, he does very well with low attention. He's a great Ornn player, great Renekton player.
He
You
turns
can
up to
definitely
team
play
fights
those
and
in
does
the
his job
groups.
really well, regardless of how the game's gone.
And that's a real strength in League of Legends, especially when you have got someone like Alchemy Grendel, who just likes to go in, and when you've got a rookie superstar AD carry like Milan, it does mean that there is a very obvious place for the rookie jungler to play around. Like, he can play around bot, and that's helpful because, the thing with a rookie jungler is if you've got something to do, you've kind of got a distinct play pattern, it makes your life a lot easier. And so I have some hope for them. Actually, you can leave Nap alone, play around bot side. Nathan can do his thing on the control mages and mid and be a veteran as they need him to be. Play through Milan and see what happens. I'm not sure how consistent that'll be, but I think they've got some options.
It gives them some options. Our range for our listeners out there is 5 to 8, so we definitely feel like Crest Gaming Act can push themselves up a bit further. How far they can push themselves, we've kind of given a vague cap of our conjoined rankings of 5th. There's a world they could go a bit higher, as Nymaera said, but we're pretty happy with this place. So we don't expect them to really mental boom. We think they're a pretty good lock for 6th, but things can happen, and
that they can.
Yes. Now, moving forward, gentlemen, none of these teams that we're expecting to actually not make playoffs. Top 6 teams for the LJL will make playoffs because of how the bracket works.
There's no one completely locked out. We're not crazy enough to say that because of
Well,
last year.
I'm willing to say one team should make it, but that we'll have to get to them probably far later on into this list. Gentlemen, that was Crest Gaming Act. I'm sure we'll be touching on them as we go through the other teams, as we've already started doing with Rascal Jester and Access. Initialize.
Yeah.
Our 4th place team is... Fifth place team?
Fifth place team. I was thinking, wait a second.
I was going to say the right team, just in the wrong order. Our 5th place team is Sengoku Gaming. We've got them at a range of 3rd to 5th. And Initialize, if you want to run us through that roster.
Yeah, we have Paz in the top lane, Crash in the jungle, Ramune back in the mid lane, Gango at AD carry, and NT as support. A couple of those players you might recognize from around about the LJL. A couple of those you might remember from the LCK and the LPL. If you remember, people like Crash were bloody high variants.
Yes, our range for them is 3rd to 5th. We think there's a lot of things that can happen with this team. And Initialize, why don't you actually give us your opinions, your placing, and everything?
So yeah, I have them in 5th myself, so that's true. I've got them as slightly higher variants than just 3rd to 5th. I think they could go 2nd to 5th. But the reason I have them where they are is I expect them to be 5th. Basically because I don't expect them to be completely consistent. They have Gango and they have Crash. Gango, to anybody who was watching the LJL last year, kind of knew this guy is very mercurial. Mentioned it before when we were talking about CGA, and I don't want to go over too much. Realized. It's one of them. Mainly because it's a great way to describe this guy. He is very much all about win lane, win game, or that Z or dead kind of mindset where you're going to win hard or lose hard, and that's kind of where he's at. And that means you sometimes pop off, and sometimes you don't have the games you want. And Crash is that to the nth degree. Like, this guy was notorious for boom or bust when he was in the LCK. He's very similar in the LPL. And having 2 players like that makes me a bit worried for their consistency. So I've got them in 5th. They could, by some grace of God, find more consistency and push their way up the rankings. I think they've got too much mechanical talent to drop lower than 5th, but I just can't push them higher than it on good conscience because of how high variance they are.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think their mid laner, more than anything for me, kind of instills that full variance to a complete nth degree. Ramune has been the player when they were playing consistently a few years back now. They almost were a lock for finals, which is kind of unreal. They went to 3 out of the 5 international events that they made finals in, which is like 3 out of the 5 splits that they've played in, they've made international, which is kind of unreal, and that's including their disappointing split with the Hawks. But then, let's be real, we need to talk about the Hawks, and for me, when Ramune was on the Hawks in spring, it wasn't great, and he wasn't the enabler that we all expected him to be, and I think that's kind of why I've got Sengoku at that 5th place spot. I don't know about you, Nymaera.
I also have him in 5th, and yeah, I guess I'm going to talk about Ramune too. If you really want to, see why I really don't think that Ramune will be consistent enough for them to push into something like second. Because I do think very high variance team, and I know that some people in our Discord, some people on Twitter, I think Joshi was putting Sengoku really high up, putting him in second and stuff like that. Yeah, I think they've got inconsistent jungle mid bot. They potentially some of the best in their roles, and they can shock teams. They might be a team that can shock one of our top 2 teams, even if they've had a really pants record and they've gone like 1-5, 2-8 or whatever. They could just come out and shock someone. But I mean, there was Ramune's Ari game in spring against LeBlanc, against Burning Core, against Rocky, who is not premier mid laner, was really bad in a lot of ways. It showed to me kind of like a bit of a weak mindset, not understanding the state of the game, and not communicating well with his team. There was a Galio game, I think it was in the very last week of spring too, where I think the Hawks were playing a Carly Galio and playing this really bread and butter. You dive in, you get the Galio ult on top, and the team just completely flubs. You saw Galio ults going way all over the place. There are a couple of games like that where I'm like, all right, okay, this is not... Whatever's working with the communication, whatever's happening with the mechanical plays, this isn't working. What I do think, something which I talked about last episode, is in terms of like our hints and tips for people predicting the LJL themselves, because of course, please get in contact with your own predictions and tell us that we're wrong or we're right or whatever. But the thing about Sengoku is that they do have an identity. They are going to be inconsistent, but they're going to be also going to be aggressive as all heck. They are effectively CGA 2020, but in 2021, because they've brought over Gango. They have another aggressive mid laner. It's not Arya, so obviously that tempers my expectations for them. They do have, of course, Crash in the jungle, which is a massive step up from CJ's 2020 jungle situation too. So yeah, there are a lot of different pieces to play around. And I think, what was my range for them? I did put them as third to sixth because again, like, I don't think if you were a tad more consistent, I would up that range to second to sixth. But because they're not, there's a good chance they just lose stupid games, and we know how close splits can get when you lose stupid games. And I think that they're probably touted for fifth, all things said and done. So that's where I put them.
Yeah, I think, they are probably going to stick in fifth, but they are absolutely a blue shell. They could probably just turn up on the day, Crash gets
Probably
3 kills in
the
the early
most
game
blue shell.
on Lee Sin, Gango destroys people, and suddenly DFM lose a game to these guys, or V3, or whoever else is looking good in the league at the time. They've definitely got the mechanical talent, but they are very much that YOLO in mechanics we trust type team.
They're the team that could win or lose to anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for my ranking, I've put them at third because I think, they have the chance to potentially beat our first place team. I've got a plus or minus of 2, so I think they could be that first place team. But I also think there's a real world chance, and honestly, realistic. And when we were doing the averages and everything, it came out as fifth, and I was actually like, I think that's a very fair place to put Sengoku. I think they could be
They have what
a
it takes.
4/5th place team, but they 100% could be the team that just dominate everybody and have a surprising run like V3 did in summer, where we're just like, we did think this team could go there, and they have some of the parts for there, but is the meta there for them? Are the players in the right mindset? Are they all actually on the same page? Because they could be the best players in their respective role, but if they've got a complete different idea on how they want to play the game, it just doesn't matter anymore. And there's definitely a chance that while they are all aggressive players, their way of aggression is rather different, especially looking at the top side of the map. I'm very concerned that Paz is just not going to gel with the rest of the team. He worked as
he's the odd one out.
He is, and he worked as a beautiful enabler for V3 in summer and spring. He really enabled around the whole map for Archer and Boogie. I know what they're thinking, and they're like, okay, so Paz can just be on our tank duty, he can be our frontliner, he can do all this. The problem is that wasn't all of Paz's idea. He would actually sacrifice a laner farm and go and invade, and is Crash going to make that call? Is he going to be like that? And I'm optimistic, obviously, as I put them in third, but I could also just see them complete mental booming and forgetting about Paz.
I mean, the other thing is on that note is that Gango is an atrocious weak side bot laner. He's a great strong side bot laner, but actually, if you're going to leave Paz to his own devices, he's not a bad weak side player, to be honest. He's smart enough, he's a good teleport user. That actually, if you're going to say, right, we're going to spend our time diving bot lane with Crash throwing his forehead at a tower with NT and Gango and Ramune roaming down, then that's not necessarily the worst pickup as like someone like Paz, honestly.
I also think for Paz, a lot of tanks are now out of meta. basically got Ornn in specific matchups. So you need to be playing Gangplank, Camille, Renekton, and Aatrox. And in fairness, he plays a couple of those. I don't think they're what he's had the most success on. I wouldn't. Yeah, I actually think the LJL as a whole is not great around playing stuff like Camille. Aatrox, Renekton. Actually, we've seen Afman, Ebby, Naps got a good Renekton.
That's not a bad Aatrox.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you're looking towards like the actual carry top lane is what the meta demands now from top lane, I don't think you're gonna find that from Paz.
Yeah.
Luckily, you're gonna find that from other areas of the map. But the question is whether they recognize that or they try and fit, square peg round hole.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. The man that's really happy about all of these changes is Ray Farkey.
Oh.
Yeah, he is. He's so happy. Oh,
we haven't got we haven't got onto his team, but I mean, for me with Sengoku, there's a lot of high risk, high reward, which I think we've hit that nail so many times on the head. Gentlemen, do we have anything else to say, or are we going to just keep going over the same points?
Nope. Remember your Mario Kart references. Remember the blue shell. Have fun watching this team, because if nothing else, they'll be entertaining.
Yeah. Oh, probably our most entertaining team. Sadly, because we lost that Rascal Jester lineup from spring. In a way, I think Sengoku might be that team for me coming into
Whereas
spring
CGA
21.
are like throwing a Bob Omar hat on the track and driving into it and blowing themselves up. Like, they've completely blue shelled themselves.
Sorry, that was a bit of a cackle there. Wasn't expecting that reference.
You brought this upon us.
Alright, move on, Lexi. Stop it.
Go on, go for it.
Alright. So
Punch
our
it.
fourth place team. Is this me saying the roster or you saying the? This is you. No, me saying the roster, right?
for
Yeah.
it.
So in fourth place, our team that we predict to be fourth. As I've said this many times, the fourth place team is coming up right now. I'm about to say it. They're about to come. Burning Core is our fourth place.
Why do you do that? You know I have to time the reveal. You dick.
I'm sorry. I'm so.
He's not sorry. He's enjoying this way too much.
I am enjoying it. We have given them a range of 2nd to 5th, and I actually have the widest berth between this team. So I'm actually going to go first, gentlemen, after I announce their lineup, because I'm even and Sam is odd. I just forgot to do it properly for Rascal Jester that time round. Right?
Yes.
Odd, even, yeah, you did.
Yeah,
Yes.
I did. Come on.
We're good. All right. In the top lane, we have Rayfaki. In the jungle, we have Once. In the mid lane, we have Gary. What? Wait, Gary. In the bot lane, we have Yuhi. Okay, back to normal. And in support, we have Proud. Okay, very good. So Burning Core have kept their whole roster. They gave up their mid laner, who I feel like was a bit hard done by. I'll be honest, I think Yu-Gi-Oh, I feel really bad for you. But hey ho. Honestly, Burning Core, because they've kept so much of their roster, I've honestly given them a range of they could be actually number 1. But they could also be the team that scrape in at 6th place, and I would be like, yeah, this is Burning Core, and they're gonna run it up, or they're gonna just run it down, but then save it at the last moment, like we saw in summer. Actually, that's actually how they stayed in summer. They had to win a game in week 7. If they didn't go 1-1 at minimum, they could have gone out. If I remember how everything worked, with also DFM losing a game or something. It was like there was a lot of different teams that could have made it. Burning Core have a lot of problems. I'm really happy that they're keeping a lot of their roster. Proud Once as a duo has just been
Beautiful.
Maybe one of the best support jungle duos in the LJL, that only just got better with more time that they got to play. Rayfaki, top 2 top laner, I think, still maybe. While he doesn't have the stats for it, what he introduces to the team and on the map is just there. Gadiadu, one of Nymaera's favorite mid laners, was a little bit hard done by his time on Axis, but definitely performed up to expectation, and I'm still pretty happy with the guy. But it comes to this point, and I hate to do this because you don't want to be bad on a player, but I'm sorry. There's the Yuhi problem that we've mentioned before, and he is not a very good ADC. And I'll be honest, I'm actually expecting stat-wise, if we just look at stats, Milan will come in their rookie split in the LJO and will have better raw stats. I don't say he's going to have a better performance, and he might not introduce more to the team, purely just stats than Yuhi. But and that's Japanese to Japanese, so I'm being fair here. I'm not going for some crazy Korean import here. That's where I'm going.
I think the one caveat is, because we talked about Yuhi last episode and being like, all right, why is this guy still on a team? Because Yuhi and Hyde last year were not good AD carries.
No.
Like they were definitely the bottom end of the LGL rankings. The one saving grace is Aphelios is suddenly back in the meta, and that's like Yuhi's like one good champion. He can play Aphelios and he can play Ashe. That's about it. Ashe is out, and so he's got Aphelios.
He had one game on Kalista that looks okay.
In fact, we talked about Burning Core in spring last year. It's like, look, you beat Burning Core by banning away Aphelios and watching the team fall apart. You just would get a winning lane bot lane and then they just fall apart. Of course, we changed that narrative a little bit when Burning Core went to that 5-game series versus DFM, and actually Yuhi and Yujiro, the outgoing mid laner, who we did say had a rough time of it, because honestly he got put in a lot of support picks and did pretty well when he was put on the carries, but just didn't have a chance to. But I mean, hopefully Yuhi's coming in with that form, and if they are, this looks like an on-paper upgrade, because as much as it's hard on Yujiro, Gadearu I think was one of my top 3 mids across 2020. I think it's probably like Arya, Pyrion, Gadearu maybe. Seros is around there.
Seros is in around there depending on what champion is on and what week it is.
And meta. It depends on form and stuff like that. Gadearu actually had really good form across the entire year, even though Axes struggled. They really struggled. So I think that you're going to get yourself a very versatile, solid laning, solid team fighting mid laner in Gadearu. Hopefully that gives a good platform for Once to play a lot of these carries, which are very meta, because even though Yuhi is not great at being the main carry for me, Once certainly is. So I think that this team potentially, as the meta stands right now, has their upper ceiling, right? So what did I put them in? Yeah, so I put them as 4th.
Yeah,
and I put them with a range of 2nd to 6th. So I'm not sure they could pip 1st. They could go all the way down to the bottom of playoffs, or even out of it. Who even knows, right? But again, a lot of moving parts. Same reason why I think CGA are going to have a lot of moving parts too. High variance, but there are definitely parts there to focus on and hopefully get some hope from.
Initialize, close us out.
I'm actually a little bit higher on them than you guys. I actually think they're going to be a bit more consistent than you guys have them. So I have them actually down at in 3rd as my my ratings. I had them up in 3rd, and I had them with a variance of 2nd to 5th, because I still think there is the Yuhi issue we've mentioned before.
Yeah.
That said, that last year they basically were a bit of an odd team where they had incredible strengths and very, very obvious and very exploitable weaknesses. I think narrowed their weaknesses probably significant. Again, we feel hard done by Yujiro, but he wasn't really a point of strength on the team, and it was an issue that both mid and AD carry weren't carryable. It left the team in a bit of an odd place with how they had to play the game. They brought in Gadearu, who I think is consistent, great laner, good champion picks, very versatile playstyle. He is, all in all, a very strong player, and it's another lane to play around, and someone who's a good roamer too. Like, he loves his like Halo Blade Echo and stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And for that reason, I think you've kept your 3 superstar players who were, arguing for some of the best in role, right? In Rafe Arky, who top 2 mid laner, great Jace player.
Top
Darius plays top laner. What did I say?
Mid
Jace player. Oh.
Okay, I was saying he's a great Chase player, great Camille player. He plays Darius in a meta where you.
Oh, true, it's Darius. I forgot about his Darius. Okay, 1st place. Let's go.
Yeah, I know. But we know that Once is he's a great carry jungler. He kind of does what Crash does, but feels a bit more consistent in it. His Kindred game where he got like a 9k team final 1 versus 3.
Oh, it's huge.
Was bloody nuts. Proud as well was one of our best support players in the league, pulling up some utterly insane things.
Please watch GFM Burning Core from summer. That best of 5. It's the best support battle. It's like a battle of the bards. It's so good.
And if Nymaera's okay with the Battle of the Bards,
I know. I hate Bard as a champion. I have so many bad memories from Season 5. People learning how to play Bard and just ruining my League of Legends experience. But yes, really good series. Go watch Proud and Gang.
So my point stands that basically, actually, you've kept your 3 really, really strong players, got another really good player in mid lane, so you've got more consistency and still the same playmaking and strong players back around. The issue then becomes Yuhi, and it is a relatively AD carry focused meta, and we have mentioned our concerns about him, which is why I've still given them a fair amount of variance, because there's still that weakness you can prey upon. I just think they have turned one of their weaknesses into a strength, and they've still got the same strengths they had before. So for me, that gives me a lot of faith in them. I love Once. He's one of my absolute favourite junglers to watch, and for that reason I've got them up in 3rd. as long as they can mitigate where Yuhi is or he steps up.
Sure. I think that's a very fair analysis.
Works out for
that
me.
you've- Yeah. I mean, I think that's really fair. I think obviously we all think Burning Core could be in a wide range. Initialize, you're just slightly higher on them, and I think your analysis for why they might be a bit more consistent because they've kept so much of their roster together, and arguably they've kept the best parts of their roster together overall. So it should just be more winning for them. I think that's fair. We'll have to definitely see how they get on. But yeah, I think we're all kind of on the idea that Burning Core could be one of the teams that could just completely throw a wrench into the LJL, which a lot of I think honestly a lot of analysts don't seem to be doing or thinking along those same lines as us, which I think is a very interesting point. And at least we have a hot tip for everybody.
Just look at Rayfark's champion pool compared to the other top laners in the LGL. If it does come down to Gangplank's a really important pick. Oh, you know, like that Jace pick, that's really important right now. Like if that's gonna be the meta, you're basically just looking at Rayfark and Debbie. That's kind of it. Like Paz has played sparing amounts of Gangplank. Dasher, when he was playing top lane, played some stuff like Vladimir or whatever. But like, if you actually want that style of pick, you're basically looking at those two. And I guess on the outside, you're looking at Cog. But like, Rayfark is like the premier carry top laner, where at least is more focused towards that than Ebby. He's more into the brawler side of things, but they both have that overlap.
Yeah. Okay. Well, gentlemen, that's Burning Core, our 4th place team. I'm happy to move on if you both are.
Absolutely.
Certainly am.
All right, let's move on to our 3rd place team. Oh, I've missed saying their full name for lads. It is going to be the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming.
Beautiful.
They have got the range between us of 3rd to 4th, our smallest range out of every single team in the LJL. We have pegged them to be a guaranteed 3rd/4th player, meaning they're also going to always have the advantage when it comes to playoffs. We believe they're going to always have side choice. We believe that are locked for playoffs. We think this is one of the most consistent teams, and honestly, in a lot of our rankings, we're pretty confident with saying that they're all in that same role. Initialize, can you run through that roster?
Absolutely. So SoftBank Hawks squad for 2021 is Appermen in the top lane, Tussle returning to the jungle, Dasher returning in mid, and then new bot laners Zenit and Corporal, who's come over from Axis.
What a beautiful team we've got here. Nymaera, why don't you start us off?
Okay, lots of stuff to touch on with this. So I guess I guess the big thing which I would want to talk about is probably the Appermen thing in the top lane, because just Appermen things is a phrase we used quite a lot through our broadcast in 2020, where sometimes he'd randomly die or randomly carry a team fight or do something crazy. On Sengoku last year, you had Pyrion and you had Blank, who were really good at playing around their mid-jungle and resetting and stuff like that. But you look at Yutori Miyashi and you look at NT, they weren't great at unlocking themselves and getting around the map. I think Corporal was really good on that on Axis, so hopefully bringing that into this team, being able to get up towards top side, having... sorry, the jungler is... Tussle, yes. So you've got Tussle, Dasher, and Corporal, who I think are all very solid players, and I think they're much better at exacting themselves on the map, and that will really help Appermen do his thing if he stays in the same style. He loves his Renekton, loves his Aatrox, has played some Camille too, so I think that actually a lot of this team feels like it should be on the same page, at least in towards that top side of things, and then that's without talking about people like Dasher, who's one of my favorite mid laners too. Heck, I was talking about like top 3 mid laners and Gariado. Dasher's in the conversation too. Really good Orianna, very important pick in the meta right now. Play stuff like Akali. Not every laner in the mid laner in the LGL does that. So I think that actually, on paper, in terms of the playstyle that they should head towards, I've got a lot of hope for the Hawks, and that's why I have them placed as... What did I put them myself? I put them as 3rd, and I had them with a range of 2nd to 4th. So I think actually, they might even be able to go slightly above that 3rd to 4th, were certain things to other teams... Yeah, certain things to other teams could happen, and maybe they end up getting 2nd because of that.
So, yeah, for me, I put them just below Burning Core. But, again, I kind of had them with a relatively high variance as well. So yes, so again, I had them with that kind of 2nd to 5th variance, where depending on how other teams perform more than anything else, they could move around if other teams just come out and blast them apart. It could be a problem. But I think there is a lot of good to great players on this team. Like Appleman is a good to great top laner is in kind of a decent meta. Not a bad split pusher, gets stuff a bit caught out, but solid strengths. Tussle, one of our better junglers, but people like Want, Steel, probably slightly better than him. Muujin as well, who we'll talk about a little later on. Also,
True.
got some names up there. It's like he's good going on great, but is he the top 3? Don't know about. Dasher, talented, definitely in that conversation with best mid laners. There's a lot of decent mid laners in the LJL right now. Same with Zenit. Like he is actually he's one of those Korean ADCs who was a shining light on squads that were struggling. Like he was on the Handle Life, he was on KT Rolster when they weren't at their best, but still had some moments of brilliance. Corporal, I think perhaps is a bit of an exception, where I actually do think he is one of our best supports. He's up there with Gang, with Proud,
Third or fourth
with Rhino. Yeah, exactly, and he can contest with those guys. I think that's true with all the Hawks. It's just a struggle to say, are any of you guys actually in contention for first here? And I don't know how true that is. Whereas some of the guys I put higher have gone, there are at least 2, maybe 3 players on your squads where I can say, actually, you guys are potentially best in role here, and that's partly why I have them where they are.
The point where we diverge is I think that these players add more to each other. So even though they might individually might not be towards second, first, I think that just in terms of the way I've kind of concocted it in my head and the style that hopefully they are driving themselves towards, they all prosper, and you don't have to pull in multiple directions. So that's why I think this team could go further than maybe we've got put down.
Yeah.
Maybe. Depends.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that where we've got them, it makes sense on that land.
Yeah, I mean, I've got them as my 4th place team. I've given them plus or minus a 1, really. I'm more thinking 3rd, 4th. I'm bang on with the combined range. I don't really think they're going to be a 5th place team. So I won't be joining you on 5th place Initialize, but I'll be honest, I think you both have said a beautiful amount about the Hawks. I think Apperman, honestly, is actually going to keep performing at some of the best. I think he's actually finally hit his peak as a player. We started seeing that towards the end of spring of last year, and definitely throughout summer. He had just the raw best stats. He was beating Ebby when it came to, if you just looked on individual stats, he was just the strictly more important top laner. But that doesn't mean he wasn't the best top laner, and that's a really important distinction between the two. Ebby enables far more for what he did in Detonation Focus Me during that time, even when they were losing a lot. Even though Apperman was getting better first blood percent. Actually, no, Ebby had a high first blood, but
he just solo killed everyone.
He did, except for Rayfarki. I think Rayfarki was tied for first. But Apperman was getting more gold per minute, his CS per minute. He was just doing more around the map for his team, statistically. But Ebby obviously enabled the team more. I think Apperman could definitely enable the Hawks beautifully. But I don't think they're going to push much further. If someone like Dasher or Zenit or Tussle or even Corporal showed to be best in role, there's a chance. And Apperman, this could be his time. I doubt it, because honestly, this is a metagame set up for Rayfarki to be the #1 top laner and to kind of run over everybody else.
Do you think Apperman's Gnar could make a return to that and Ebby? We know about those two playing Gnar.
I honestly think Gnar is not a good pick at the moment.
Unless you can,
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of players are playing it because they think it's good, and they're playing it in a lot of wrong comps. Now it will come down to SoftBank's management and coaching staff to identify when to pick the Gnar and not. We do know Apperman and Ebby specifically play that Gnar.
Yeah, I think there's that talent level are required on the champion. I think you have to be quite good at Gnar to bring him out, because all of the buffs have been to Mega Gnar, and that means you've got to have a team who is really good at playing around your top laner's teleports. Really good, and your player needs to be really good about playing around the Rage Bar too. That's quite a difficult pairing to get, especially on a pro level stage.
We're also getting a brand new a pseudo new coaching staff for this team. Awaker has left. Zandark has also left. Sweet was around for part of the Hawks in summer, but he came in after summer. He came in after the summer split had started, kind of came with them, and then re-signed with them in December. He joined in July, so the season was basically over. He came in to kind of help that mid-transition, and clearly has had some effect, because he is their head coach, and who's their other? They've got another coach in who
I
no
think that,
information, no previous coaching experience, except they were a competitive StarCraft 2 player apparently in between 2010 and 2014. Random.
I know that the Hawks definitely stepped up a notch in terms of their strategy, how they played around, particularly early games. Actually, they played pretty well with that, which is why actually when we came into like the Hawks versus CGA series in first round of playoffs in summer, we thought, okay, you know, there's a chance that they pull off something special here. They didn't. They lost 3-1, but there were definitely points where you think, okay, yeah, you know, there's some angles of attack they could definitely use in this series. But yeah, again, really hard as a third party to judge what coaching staff is going to do. I just look at the players and what they have tended towards in the past, and I think the Hawks have got a relatively cohesive team in the way that technically Sengoku do too, but then Paz is kind of the odd one out. I think that the Hawks have a bit more of a consistent identity, at least with that.
Yeah, I mean, probably one last thing, and that's you guys have got anything else to say. Is like, actually, I'm really excited to see Corporal on a good team here.
Yes.
Like he was on Axis last year, and actually, you know, Axis, you know, in the spring they did a good job about pulling together and like growing as a roster. But there was a lot of rookies, a lot of questions. Axis as an organization has not really been known as a super team, right? But actually, coming onto the Hawks, who've basically come into the league and thrown money at it, looking to pull together some good rosters.
You know
I think it's really exciting for Corporal to come in and try and prove himself with some of these very talented, very veteran players.
So after we do this list, we should go through and each of us should choose a player that we're just really happy for their roster move. Like, I know I'm going to choose my one, because that's really obvious. But if you want to have a think about that, that might be an interesting thing to finish it out.
Can I have Rayfarki not moving?
Honestly, look, you can just be happy for one person. Like, oh, they stayed on this roster. Good for them.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, I think that's all I've got on the Hawks. We got through a good amount there.
I think we've hit the Hawks into the ground, but they'd rather be hitting home runs. I think when the split starts, gentlemen, let's move on to our second place team. Combined together, we have put V3 Esports at second place with a combined range between first and fourth. Now that's a wide range for us to cover. I'll quickly run over the roster and then let's get to talking. We got Kogkog in the top lane, Mujin in the jungle, Ace in the mid lane, Hollow, brand new arrival to the LJL, in the bot lane, and Raina reprising their role as support. Mujin is also new to the LJL. Some new faces, some change around. V3 have kept some parts the same, some parts forced different, as we've already talked about in episode 1, and then arguably upgraded the top lane.
The problem I've got here is that I've spent so much time thinking to myself, is this upgrade or a downgrade, and kind of just eventually reaching this middle ground of kind of side grades across most of what they've done. That's the really difficult thing. It's just figuring out how, because of course everything you can kind of see how they're kind of like on the same level. Some of these players, like I think Mujin, potentially similar level to Boogie, but
jungler. Yeah, really good jungler guys.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell how that fits in with a team ethos and stuff like that. That's the really difficult thing for me.
Who wants to start us off?
I'll run a little bit. Or do you want to go, Lexi? There's a thought.
Yeah, I'll go first. Let's talk about V3 Sports. So for me, Ace reprising his role was shown, as we've already somewhat hinted to. I actually think Ace was perfect for V3. He enabled a lot of what this team's identity, and especially when Paz was the architect for the spring and summer roster, he asked Ace in a lot of respects. He was like, I think we need to have you be our player around. Reiner has stayed with the team after his incredible run through just going through a absurd rookie way of making it through all the ladders, proving that you can go through the system and then get to Worlds.
And the Challenger Series and everything,
yeah, I mean, representing the country for an amateur high school league and then making it all the way through, like, it's unreal. Kog had a pretty shit year, I'll be honest with him, and he's still trucking, so bless him, he deserves to at least be on
one of those players we're happy with the roster moves. Put it
Very happy for them. Mujin, well, okay, so this is where we have to come into V3, definitely tempting like some elder god, or maybe they talk to Aurelian Soul, because this is
some contract in their own blood. Yeah,
because this is the third Flash Wolves player from the jungle role that they've had in a row. They started with Baby, then they went Boogie, Yeah, yes, and then we were like, well, this is just a happy coincidence. Now with Mugen, it's like, no, this is not a coincidence anymore. V3 have
some pact here.
I mean, they almost made worlds with Baby. They made worlds with V3, with Boogie, and now they're hoping to make groups with Mugen, right? That's how the system works.
Mugen is another one of those, Flash Wolves jungle superstars, one of those LPL style jungle superstars who plays a lot of different junglers to a very high level, is a great carry. You can play around him, and in the current meta, you can definitely play through jungle. You can run sort of Gordrinker hyper ganking junglers. You can run those carry Grave style junglers still, where you're farming heavier. So a lot of versatility, and that's great news for someone like Mugen, who is a wonderful Graves player and the like.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an amazing team to look at. Hollow is the big question mark, honestly, coming into this roster. However, if you look at the rest of the parts, for me, if Hollow is enabled like Archer was enabled, there's all chances you could have the best version of Hollow, which we don't know the full ceiling of Hollow, because I'll be honest, Hollow has never really been given an opportunity to fully shine to his best extent. Every time he's been given a brief opportunity, the team gets disbanded, he gets thrown off to another team, and it's like he's finally started to get that, and then they're like, and you're gone. Next team. And he's just like...
Yeah.
This might be his
he was on the team that became Sandbox, right?
Yeah,
he qualified into
got
LCK.
them into them. Yeah,
and he was replaced with Ghost, who is now a world champion. So at least he's being replaced by some pretty damn good talent. I guess so. I do have them a second. I and ahed a lot about this. You know how I said that the Hawks could get second? A lot of that's because I'm not so overwhelmingly confident with V3. I think there are ways that they could fail. I think one of the things is that you don't lose mid gracefully anymore. A lot of how V3 performed so well in summer is Ace enabling the team. It was. They found a way to weaponize Ace in his comfort zone, and that wasn't really demolishing lane. It was him moving out of lane and affecting the map. You don't get to do that so easily anymore. You don't have common mid in meta. Galio is a thing, but does tend to get run around a lot. We saw what happened to Ace if he has a Galio game versus a Syndra in play and something like that, where you can get taken to pieces. You can do. There was a Casterton game too, right? A lot of games where his Galio was there were answers that were found to it. So I'm worried a bit about Ace and how his champion pool will not really allow him to do what he did in summer. Like, we saw his Orianna in one game of the finals, which was a never really been an Akali Lucian player. He plays Zoe, that's one thing. He plays Zoe and Syndra. If he goes back to those champions, which I'd really like him to, then that's a really important thing. So I think that it will be a lot about how the team's coaching staff are directing Ace to play. Because for me, I really like what Mugen could bring to this team, and I think that in the way that Ace enabled Boogie, he could hopefully enable Mugen as well. It's just about all the other moving parts around there. I think across the rest of the team, V3 have moved some agency out of bot lane, because Archer was such a playmaker, into Cog in the top side, who's replacing Paz, who's a stalwart, but he wasn't really the initiator. So I think that's probably the other thing which I'd look at this team and say, okay, that's somehow ended up as a side grade, I guess, even though Archer was really good. That maybe it's a slight downgrade, but it's a changing of power.
Yeah, I think...
Quick note, sorry, Initialize, can I do this, and then you can have the full floor. Quick little change also that happened with V3 in the coaching staff department is Dragon came in, who had also previously worked with Hollow. So there is that kind of connection. They worked with each other for about 2 years on different teams, and they just kept coming back together. So that's a big reason why I believe Hollow has come across, because Dragon pulled that. Also, while they lost Sun to Sengoku Gaming, they did gain Awaker, who has been on broadcast, and lots of people over in Japan think very highly of their opinion on coaching and just in the game in general. So I think that's a fair trade. Losing Sun, but gaining Awaker is actually okay. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's a good note. And again, I think I've got them in second, basically because Mugen is very similar to how Boogie played. Hollow is another one of these very talented AD carries who's been high up in the Korean
CK
challenger leagues, on the ladder as well as in the region. He's probably got a little bit more experience than Archer, honestly, just in terms of competitive stuff. Though perhaps Archer had a fantastic breakout year, and that's the reason, I'm quite happy to see those picked up. I think Cog as well has a few more strings to his bow than Paz. Even if, like, he does pick up things like the Kale, for example, he's pulled out before.
Cannon.
Yeah, Cannon, exactly. My issue is that, like, while he pulls those out, he's not as dominant on those kind of picks as someone like Ebby or Ray Farkey is. And if he goes into those guys, he has kind of had some troubles before with that. So, there are a couple question marks there, even if I think, a few more options perhaps, at least in the draft there. There are still a couple issues with Ace, perhaps. He's got his great strengths in his roaming and his enabling and his ability to just turn up when the jungler needs him. All good strengths, but we kind of also saw the other side of that coin. Worlds where Ace really did get quite exposed by some of the better mid laners in the world, and that's always a bit of a risk. That said, I've got them in second because I'm thinking, okay, new players coming in, that may take a little while to gel, but they've still got the likes of Rhino, who I really rate as a support player.
Yeah, don't judge them by play-ins.
I'm sorry, I have to.
He's so good.
They struggled in play-ins. They were rookie. That's a known phenomenon. Don't judge them off of that. Honestly, Rhinos, Tom Kench, Nautilus, Thresh, Set, all just ridiculously good. So yeah, watch out for them. This lane could
really
be very, very dominant.
And gentlemen, Initialize, what is his name again?
Rhino.
Nymaera, what is his name again?
Reiner.
MaskedSwan, what is his name? It's Reiner. We're just really hammering that point in, that this man's name and what he wants to go by is Reiner.
It is the thing about LJL is that it looks like, well, it's written in Romanji because of what you have to do for International League of Legends. Japanese phonetics, in terms of like how they do it, it's syllable by syllable, sometimes not the same as in English, so watch out for that.
Yeah.
It's no Reiner here.
Yeah.
Even though we got that wrong for spring.
If you were going to spell it Reiner in Japanese, it'd be R-E-I, not R-A-I. So there you go. Alas. Yes.
If I may, a rain control and bring us back on. Gentlemen, I'm going to do a quick round up from each of our personal tier lists, and then we will go in for our combined one, because I think everybody knows, if they've got a little bit of following, who our top team is. But let's do a quick recap before we announce them. My 8th place is Rascal Jesters. In 7th place, I have Axis. 6th place, I have Crest Gaming Act. 5th place is Burning Core. 4th place is the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. In 3rd place, I have Sengoku Gaming. And in 2nd place, I have V3. Nymaera, if you can do yours, please.
Hilariously, mine is exactly the same as the combined ranking. It's on your screen. It's in 8th, I have Axis. In 7th, I have Rascal Jester. In 6th, that's how that number works, it's Crest Gaming Act. In 5th, it's Sengoku Gaming. 4th, it's Burning Core. 3rd is the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. And in 2nd, it's V3 Esports.
Beautiful as always, and it helps for our people watching on YouTube for that. But beautiful recap for our combined list as well, Nymaera.
Nice.
Initialize, can you close us out with your top 8? Or top 7?
Top 7. My top 7, such as it is, Axis down in 8th, Crest Gaming Act in 7th, Rascal Jester up in 6th, and perhaps a bit of a bold call. 5th, I had Sengoku Gaming. 4th, the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming. 3rd, Burning Core, another one with perhaps slightly spicy takes. And in 2nd, V3 Esports with you gents.
Oh, gentlemen, with great pleasure and to, in theory, no one's surprisement, we have Detonation Focus me in 1st place. Our combined range is 1st or 2nd. We are expecting them to be in the gauntlet match. However, things have changed, and this is not the Detonation Focus me that your mum and dad remember from a year ago. This is different, and Initialize, I will give you the honors of announcing that roster.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure to run through DFM's roster. It is Ebby returning in the top lane, Steel returning in the jungle, Saros also returning in the mid, but what is this? Arya of CGA fame, of LJL legend, is also joining the DFM roster. Utapon is back in bot. Gang has also re-signed. But for some interesting reasons, Kazu, the coach of DFM, will also be slipping into the support role to enable some of the, residency shenanigans that need to be played for spring, till Steel, who is another Korean, will be getting residency in summer, when the full super team can be unleashed for real.
Assuming Gang stays with the roster for the full split of 2021, I believe, if I've read everything and understood everything correctly, Gang will also become residency at the
Nice.
end of the summer season, meaning come 2022, we could have 2 more imports onto the destination lineup, and we could have a full 5 Korean team
Oh no,
in
the
the LJL.
LCK 4th seed.
There we go, lads. There we go.
Oh.
And we've already got a few players that can fulfill that role if we need it. We're ready to go, but yeah, go on. Who really wants to take this first? The DFM fanboy or the Aria fanboy?
I'll start and pass over to Al because I
Gotcha.
think he'll
Okay,
want to
yeah,
wax.
gotcha. You guys do that. You guys do that.
So basically, this is still that championship roster at its heart, in that you've still got all the guys who are in the roster from last year who've been in the roster since 2018. You know that with Seros and Gang particularly, we're talking about there. Seros is, at least allegedly, according to rumors, looking to actually move to a different esport or step back away from the team, but he's sticking around partly because things are a little bit weird at the minute with the residency stuff. So with that in mind, DFM are effectively running with 2 potential rosters. The number one is the roster we all know and love, which is Ebby, Steel, Seros, Utapon, and Gang, which they've been playing with for years. The alternative, which is what we're expecting to see a bit more of, is Seros being switched out for Aria and Gang being switched out for Kazu in spring. Kazu, again, is their coach, or one of their coaches, who kind of in the support role at the minute. And then when summer comes around, Kaz will be out, Gang will go in, and that will then be Gang and Aria as the 2 starters that will come in for summer. What that means is that for spring, DFM are in a bit weird spot. A lot of existing synergy, still a lot of really great players, and a little bit of versatility in their players going around, but still some questions about where they'll end up. We obviously still have a lot of faith in this team, but there are some questions to be answered. And Alex, at which point I'll throw over to you about why picking up Aria is so damn huge for this squad.
Well, surprisingly, I was talking about, let's pick a player that we're really happy for with their roster moves, man. Because Sam's really glad that, that Corporal's on a really good team. I'm really glad that Ray Farkey's got himself a bit of an upgrade across the board. Aria, man, he's got himself a damn team. CJ was such a burning piece of... Look, it was...
CJ in the LJL for most of summer.
CJ succeeded because of Aria. He was the pressure point.
Good.
He had an answer to every situation, it felt like. If you left Aria to pick on Red 5, the very last pick, and you just asked him, have you got anything that could win us this game? He'd normally say yes. Kassadin, Aurelia, just pick up his Zoe, even in a draft which it felt was kind of weird, he'd still find ways to make it absolutely disgusting. His LeBlanc is another one. Silas, this guy has a champion ocean. He's got the largest champion pool in the LJL. I don't think he had that in spring and summer, both splits, even though Ninja was very much trying to vie for that in spring.
Yeah, he did.
And I mean, we'll talk about it in some stuff that we're going to be recording on each of the teams too, but the thing about Aria is that it doesn't feel like he's spread himself too thin with his champion pool either. If he feels threatening on everything. There's no pick where he feels muted. There have been a couple of games where he's been banned out 5 times and left on something like Azir, which is a bit exploitable. He still needs to be shut down from that point. I think I had a couple of worries about, DFM have played around control mages a lot, and don't get me wrong, Aria's not really an Orianna player, hasn't pulled that out before, but is a Syndra player, is a Zoe player. He does have things on that kind of wavelength, which you can pull out in a similar situation, and he wins pretty much every lane. I think the thing about DFM as a whole, and this goes for Aria as well, they have the strongest raw talent in the lanes of any LJL team. That's why I've got them first. Last year, of course, V3 came into summer and they won it all, right? They did. They came first. But DFM ran them to 5 games, and now with this upgrade in the mid lane, and also with V3 shifting around, having to rebuild that synergy, maybe downgrading some issues, DFM look for me the out-and-out best laners, best team fighters, most versatile, and most high-skilled roster in the LJL, maybe ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, no, the best. This is the best LJL roster ever if it works out.
Yeah. I think our questions as a whole then rely on actually how good are they going to be in spring, because they can't bring the full force of this roster together fully until summer, once residency comes in and Aria and Gang can come in at the same time. So for example, why I'm mentioning Gang with this kind of same high praise is the people like Maple Street, for example, think Gang is
go-to
possibly...
LJL analyst.
Yeah, he is, but he's also someone who's relatively active, speaks in English, all those kind of reasons. But he is considered potentially top 2 player in the LJL, perhaps. He's really damn good, guys. I mean, Reiner, Proud, also excellent, but Gang has been really good. So if you're bringing him alongside Arya, who's also out and out the best mid in the league, alongside Ebby, who has been one of the best top laners, if not the best top laner in the league for years, Steel, who's still excellent, Utapon, who is, now Yutori Miyashi has retired, probably the best AD carry in the league as well. That's just a hell of a lot of talent. Like, good lord.
It's huge.
The question is, how much can they bring to bear in spring? So worst comes to worst, they could default to their championship roster, play the way they always have, and honestly, with the synergies they've got, probably still run away with spring because his teams were still coming together as a whole, and that means that existing synergies alongside raw talent probably gives them an edge. They can also run with Arya and have even more raw talent, and then have Utapon kind of try and cover up for Kazu's weaknesses in bot side. I guess the questions that do need to be asked is, can Utapon cover up for Kazu if they do run for that? And can they integrate Arya if they do?
I think if they're having issues, we know that there aren't too many TF players in the league, I think. So Saros was one of them. He's been switched out. And then it was Galliardo, and Arya had it banned against him. Pyrion was, but he's gone. So that kind of leaves us with, only a couple. I mean, Ace doesn't play it. Don't know about One Nation probably does. Okay, so we actually have a couple in there. So like, if you really wanted to, you pick Shen, you just take TP down with Ebby, you've got TF2, and you just end up just piling bot. I'm sure that they have I think most of these players you can class as instinctive team fighters. They definitely know what they're doing, and hopefully you can just pile on bot and kind of paper over that cracks up until summer.
I think you're more than able to do that with the DFM roster. The thing is, with this DFM roster, because they have the flexibility in the spring especially, they can just go in knowing that they want to try something against maybe a team that they perceive from scrims that is a lower caliber team. So they can maybe be like, okay, Arya, we're going to have you and Kazu come in, and Arya, we want you to play something wild because we want to just try this on a stage and see if it actually works out. Because if it works here, similar to like the V3 switch with putting Paz on Sion, if they can find to do one or two of that, they're going to be able to pull out so much random stuff, because they could genuinely eventually have it so Arya and Syros are a flex. The difference between Arya, similar to what they did with Arya, Syros and Ramune, the difference is Arya is the main mid laner, Syros is the flex pick. And when they're like, we need a Karma mid, we think we're going to need Karma mid for our draft here.
Karma, Orianna, Heimerdinger.
Yeah, but those are the kind of champions where you go, Arya, we respect you as a player, but we need Syros in for this, because he's just the mad scientist for this kind of champion. He is known as one of the better ones for that. And there's so much stuff that still stays the same even when this lineup does a switch around with Kazu and Arya and Gang and Syros, because Steel, Utapon and Ebby still stay in there. That's one of your solo laners, that's your jungler, and that's your bot laner. And your bot laner is also might just be the best bot laner now with Yutori Miyashi retiring. It's like,
and Archer leaving too.
And Archer leaving as well. It's like, well, Utapon just gets to kind of take his crown back and go, well, I guess I'll face everybody else and I'll switch my supports out to make it even more difficult for me.
Yeah. I mean, there's also that world, right, where actually, if you've got Kazu in, Utapon's a great weak side player, and then Steel gets to play between Ebby and Arya in the top side of the map. Sounds all right to me, frankly. That's not the worst. That's not the end of the world. And for that reason, I think that's why we all have them so high up. It's actually, the raw talent is still there, and they have some fallback patterns if things start going a little awry. That said, there is a world where Kazu, yes, he's an ex-pro. He's still pretty high up in the challenger rating. Or he's not. I'm not sure what he's challenger or, but he's an ex-pro, been played for years. He knows how to play pro. So like he as long as he's not losing you games, he doesn't necessarily have to win you them. If he is losing you games, things get a bit trickier. And Arya, of course, is a very different player to Saros. And if DFM struggle to integrate him, maybe that's a problem. So, yes, we have them first. Yes, we expect them to be at the top, particularly come playoffs. And once they've gone through playoffs, you can never count this squad out in playoffs. We thought about it in summer last year. Were we very nearly wrong? They, took V3 to match point. We're up 4K and, just about got squeaked out by V3. Goddamn close.
And I think going back to like the whole flexing stuff like that too. I mean, Saros is also a really big game player. If you look back to spring playoffs, after they lose the Juggernaut match, you go to like the V3 semifinals and then into the finals. Saros just ripped his opposing mid laners a new one. Like he pulled out, like, he has a lot of control mages. He plays his Orianna, Heimerdinger, Xerath, Ziggs, Karma, as you were saying, right? You know, he plays all that stuff. But he can play stuff like Azir too, which is also on that kind of side of things. But he's got playmaking too. He was like single-handedly winning games versus Sengoku on his Azir and just kind of making it really hard to play the game because his teleports are so on point. I think that you do have a very good fallback if Arya isn't integrated well. I think Arya is more consistent. I think he has more champions. I think he has a higher ceiling. I think this is a move to go towards, and this is something which can really help out DFM. They've also picked up Yang as well in the coaching position, so hopefully that really helps.
Yang's older brother, Yang. Coach Yang has been like a huge proprietor of just learning as much as everything and anything. He's highly respected over in the region. I like him because he watched my content, so that's cool. He watched my scouting grounds and thought it was at least good enough to tell Corporal to watch it. So I mean,
nice.
I'll take that. But also a big part of it is, let's be real, if this roster of DFM works, with the amount of work that we know Arya was putting in to just help Ace and the V3 team when they went to Worlds in China, Arya was helping so much with boot camping, organizing stuff. It was made aware, and it wasn't hard for us to find this stuff, that Arya was pulling strings in the background to try and give any and every bit of help for V3. I think that what he has done has now, DFM has seen that and gone, what about if we just get that guy? He's already maybe the best mid laner. Sorry, Siros, but he probably is. And if he can pull those strings, maybe we could do well internationally. Maybe.
I really hope so.
This, I think, is a long-term plan for DFM, because I think they might be aware that they might need to start switching out one or two members moving forward. Once Steel and Gang get their residency, it's going to be a lot harder for them to hold on to them, especially with more money being thrown into the LJL. We know Sengoku were willing to throw money. We know the Hawks are willing to throw money, and we know V3 have already been talking about throwing money at stuff. So if these three other teams are willing to throw money, it's going to be hard to keep their talent for ages. Arya is going to be a good way to kind of keep this roster together, because if it works, they could go far, and they could actually finally do the one thing we've been begging the LJL to do once, and that's make groups. We don't care after that. We just want groups. We just want groups.
I mean, they got really close in 2019 MSI. They went 4-2. They were so close to make groups. Basically, they ran into EDG, which is rough. And again, like, that's just sometimes luck of the draw. You know, there is talent here, and the thing is, we basically came out of Worlds in 2020 and went, look, you have to be this tall to ride the World's roller coaster. You have to be this good mechanically, and for all how good your macro is, for however well you play as a unit, if you get picked apart so the unit just falls apart because one of your members is just getting slammed in lane.
Or you're just misplaying because of nerves.
Yeah, exactly. That is a problem. DFM have veteranship, they have mechanics, and we have a lot of... We are putting this forward as an LJL super team, and for good reason. Whether they'll be that in spring is perhaps a little up for debate. We still reckon they'll win, but this is kind of a warming up period to see where they'll end up in summer as well, when I think things get really juicy. Either way, Arya on a team with a lot more consistency where he doesn't have to be the primary carry, I think could be quite exciting, because, you know, he maybe can pull out things like the Orianna or the Galio and not feel like he has to be playing hyperscaling people like, I don't know, Silas or Vladimir and run over things.
It was like, Forgiven used to say that back on like the old HTK roster. It's like, yeah, I feel like I can finally pull out Callista now. You know, I think they've earned that. Or, you know, there's a whole load of people who've been like, and I think Boogie's a really good analog for that back in spring, where Boogie was playing everything, just trying to find something which worked for his team. He kind of had to play carries, he figured that. But like there were games like he was trying to play Trundle, trying to play Skarner, and you know, individually he was fine. The team just wasn't really meshing with it too well. And they eventually got to a point where they could do in summer, right? That's when he really managed to just do anything. But hopefully Ari finds a way to just like be that just world-class talent we think he is. I mean, I think that Arya is on the level of the likes of the VCS's Kati and DO1, who are their best mid laners. I think he's at that level. But in CIS's No Man's too. This is one of the emerging region's true stars. Watch this guy. Come and watch his games.
Honest, Arya is the kind of player who could get DFM to group stage and then be immediately signed to a top
Yep.
tier org in LEC, NA, China, or
agree.
Korea, and we see them eventually become like a top, not win worlds. I'm not going to say something crazy like win worlds or win MSI, but he could definitely
legit.
be in like the top 4, a team that makes top 4, and we're just like, man,
We
I
could-
remember
yeah.
him when he was dominating LJL.
could do. No,
That's the kind of crazy story he could have, because his story started in the LJL.
Yeah, he's got a very good understanding of how to play the game, and luckily with this roster, it's not just him. It's not just like a really flaky
Huge.
Gango, and then the rest of the map being really weird. You've got Ebby, who was solo killing Visitachi in 2019 Worlds. This guy has been playing against top tier talent in the top lane internationally for a very long time. Before last split, when they lost, Ebby's pretty much won every other split he's been a part of. If you had Ebby on your team, you won. Utapon, I was talking to Ibriz, who cast for the PCS this last year as well, and he was saying, oh yeah, Utapon, I remember that guy. He used to be a really good top laner, and then he became a really good ADC. He's been role swapping all over the place, and he's got a lot of respect for him. There's international recognition from a lot of these players. Steel's
Everybody
been around
knows
the place.
Syros.
Yeah, Syros as well. I mean, Syros has been a bit more up and down, but
He's fun, right? He's known
Yeah.
for pulling out things like Heimerdinger and then getting slapped by Jensen.
I mean,
but
heck,
either way,
if again, go watch the Burning Core series versus DFM when Gang carries that. I don't know. Go watch the first game between DFM, Rascal Jester, and Spring from Gang, where he just wins the entire game, which is a completely null, neutral state with one fantastic Rakan engage. There is material out there if you want to see how good these players are. We've seen so many times each of these players perform their roles the absolute highest standard the LJL can see, and now they are all on the same team. Watch this team.
yes.
However, this is just our opinion, and these are where we're predicting. While we are on the side of probably popularity when it comes to a lot of these teams and a lot of these players, especially Detonation Focus Me, with them being the top team, we recommend you get in contact with us. Give us your tier list. Give it over on our Discord. Tweet it out and at the LJLOU and tweet it at us. I think this is definitely a conversation we want to see. We're going to try and run a prediction for Spring Split and as well throughout all of it over on our Discord. So there will be a dedicated channel if you are interested in that. I promise you, before week 1 starts, it will be up. I just need to keep working on things, and it's lots of plates going in the background. But I mean, gentlemen, that's our prediction episode. There's so much we've uncovered and so talked about. I mean, our conjoined list is Axis in 8th place, Rascal Jester in 7th, Crest Gaming Act in 6th, Sengoku in 5th, Burning Core in 4th, Fukuoka SoftBankers Gaming in 3rd, V3 in 2nd, and Detonation Focus Me in 1st. We could be wrong, ladies and gentlemen, but we could also have it bang on the money, and we get to say I told you so to everyone that thought differently, because let's be real, it's our podcast, and we can say that if we want to.
No, we got most of our picks pretty well in spring, besides the Hawks completely bombing out. In summer, we were
There's gonna be one.
pretty far up there. We didn't predict the V3 thing, sure, okay, a lot of stuff like that. What we really hope is that at least it goes through the right thought processes, is leading along the same thoughts of conversation, and it gives you a couple of our insights as people that have watched every damn game of the LJL in 2020, spent hundreds of broadcast hours covering this region, to at least put you on the right path and form your own opinions, because that's more important to us. We don't want people to agree with us. We want people to engage with us. That's it.
Look, like, there's a world where DFM, with their kind of weird roster shenanigans they have to pull out in spring, aren't quite ready to take on the big leads and do fall down a bit down the table. Like, I've got them with a range of 1 to 3. Maybe they end up in 3rd because they're dropping silly games in the regular season where they shouldn't be. Maybe there's a world where, I don't know, Burning Core, with their massive mercurial nature, actually find some more consistency because of Guerrero. They get to push up a bit higher. That's what makes this really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some more of your guys' predictions yourselves, because I think this should be a pretty exciting split, even if there is this kind of DFM, eyebrow-raising, oh boy, kind of roster change that's gone on.
With that all said, ladies and gentlemen, this will be the end of episode 2, season 2 of the podcast. If you have any questions for our future episodes, you can be sure to hit them over in our Discord server, or you can tweet at us any of your questions. We will be broadcasting the last 4 games live as they happen on Saturday on
It's
the
better for our time zone.
23rd. Being UK guys, it is horrendously bad, the time zone. And then we will broadcast the first 4 games, similar to how we did a lot of our coverage in spring and summer. And that will be coming at you. Times will be going out on our Discord and Twitter as always. We have already put a soft one out. I believe it's 9 o'clock for Saturday and 11 o'clock for Sunday is our stream times are planned at the moment. We have to go a bit early on Saturday purely just so we can actually catch the game. If we miss it, we miss a whole game basically by being an hour late. But for me, I'm all good. Gentlemen, closing thoughts on the episode.
I think we should be excited about this split. We've lost a few stars, we've gained a few more, and I think this should still be a pretty competitive split of the LJL. And fingers crossed for seeing a little bit more out of this region on international stage and stuff as well. I think hopefully some lessons will have been learned, and we'll be seeing better things out of us.
We can hope, can't we? We can hope.
Absolutely can. And like I said, pretty much as soon as World's Plans ended, I said, DFM with Aria, let's go. This is the roster which will make or break the LJL. This is the best we can give. We have that now. Time to see if it works out, and I hope you'll join us on that journey to see if it does.
That all said, thank you so much for watching. For myself, MaskedSwan, Nymaera below me, and Initia1ise at the very bottom, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all very, very soon.
Booyakasha.